The village of Hollow Creek slept. Nestled in a secluded valley, the village was a picture of serenity during the day. But as night fell, a different story unfolded. A blanket of darkness covered the houses, punctuated only by the pale glow of the moon. The moonlight cast long, eerie shadows that seemed to stretch and twist with a life of their own. The silence was heavy, broken only by the rustle of leaves in the wind. The trees whispered secrets to each other, their branches swaying like skeletal fingers in the night. But beneath the surface of tranquility, an unsettling fear lingered. It was a fear that had been passed down through generations, a fear that clung to the very air. Whispers of the Old Hag haunted the night. These whispers were not just stories to scare children, they were warnings, etched into the collective memory of the village. They spoke of a malevolent spirit, a spectre that preyed on the unsuspecting. The Old Hag was said to be a remnant of a dark past, a curse that had never been lifted. She would arrive as a silent shadow, a harbinger of terror. Her presence was felt before it was seen, a chill that crept up the spine and settled in the bones. Her victims, trapped in their sleep, would feel her presence like a weight upon their chest. They would wake, paralyzed, unable to move or scream, their eyes wide with terror. The Old Hag, they said, was not merely a figment of a nightmare. She was real. Her legend was rooted in the very soil of Hollow Creek, a dark thread woven into the fabric of the village. Her touch, icy cold, could steal the very breath from your lungs. It was said that those who felt her touch would never be the same, their spirits forever marked by her malevolence. She fed on fear, growing stronger with each terrified gasp. The more fear she consumed, the more powerful she became, a cycle of dread that seemed unbreakable. The villagers knew to fear the night. They would lock their doors and windows, whispering prayers and clutching talismans, hoping to ward off her evil. They knew to fear the shadows that danced in the corners of their rooms. These shadows seemed to move with a will of their own, dark shapes that hinted at the presence of the Old Hag. They knew to fear the Old Hag. Her legend was a constant reminder that in Hollow Creek, the night belonged to her. And as the moon cast its pale light over the village, the whispers in the night continued, a chilling symphony of fear and dread.
Agatha, the oldest resident of Hollow Creek, sat by her fireplace, her wrinkled hands wrapped around a warm mug. The fire crackled softly, casting flickering shadows on the walls, creating an ambience that was both comforting and eerie. The room was filled with the scent of burning wood and the faint aroma of herbs that Agatha always kept nearby. Her eyes, though clouded with age, held a spark of wisdom and a hint of mischief as she prepared to share another of her legendary tales. Her rocking chair creaked rhythmically, a comforting counterpoint to the unsettling tale she wove. The chair had been in her family for generations, each creak a testament to the countless stories it had witnessed. The rhythmic motion seemed to lull her audience into a trance, making them more susceptible to the chilling narrative that was about to unfold.
"It always begins the same way," she rasped, her voice a low murmur that sent shivers down the spines of the young ones gathered around her. The children, though frightened, were irresistibly drawn to her stories, each one more terrifying than the last. They huddled together, their faces illuminated by the firelight, their expressions a mix of fear and anticipation. A heaviness on your chest, a feeling that something is terribly wrong. It's as if the very air around you thickens, making it hard to breathe. The room seems to close in, and an inexplicable dread takes hold, rooting you to the spot.
The children, their eyes wide with a mixture of fear and fascination, leaned in closer. They hung on her every word, their imaginations running wild with the images she conjured. Each child could almost feel the weight on their own chest, the creeping sense of doom that Agatha described so vividly. Agatha continued, her voice barely a whisper now. The room seemed to grow colder, the firelight dimming as if in response to her words. She spoke of shadows that moved on their own, of whispers that came from nowhere, and of eyes that watched from the darkness. You try to scream, but no sound comes out. Your throat tightens and your voice is stolen by the terror that grips you. The silence is deafening, filled only by the pounding of your own heart. You try to move, but you are paralyzed. Your limbs feel like lead, and no matter how much you will them to move, they remain stubbornly still. The fear is all-consuming, leaving you helpless and vulnerable, and then she paused, her voice dropping to a chilling whisper. You see her. The old hag, with her twisted form and malevolent eyes, emerges from the shadows. Her presence is suffocating, her gaze piercing through the darkness to find you.
Agatha's words hung heavy in the air, painting a vivid picture of the terror that awaited those unfortunate enough to encounter the old hag. The children could almost see her, lurking in the corners of their vision, waiting to pounce. Her stories were not mere entertainment, they were warnings, passed down through generations. Each tale carried a lesson, a piece of wisdom wrapped in fear. Agatha believed that by sharing these stories, she was preparing the children for the dangers that lurked in the world. Warnings that were about to be put to the test. For in Hollow Creek, legends had a way of coming to life, and the old hag was no mere figment of imagination. She was real, and she was watching, waiting for her next victim. The children, though scared, knew that Agatha's stories were their shield, their guide through the darkness that surrounded them.
Sarah, a young woman from the city, scoffed at the villagers' superstitions. She had always been a rational thinker, someone who believed in science and facts. The idea of ghosts and spirits was something she found laughable, a relic of a bygone era. She had arrived in Hollow Creek seeking peace and quiet, a refuge from the noise and chaos of city life. The constant hustle and bustle, the never-ending traffic, and the ceaseless noise had worn her down. She longed for a place where she could hear herself think, where the air was clean and the nights were silent. The quaint village, with its charming cottages and friendly inhabitants, seemed like the perfect escape. The villagers greeted her with warm smiles and open arms, eager to share their way of life with the newcomer. The slow pace of life, the simplicity and the sense of community were a welcome change from the impersonal city. But the stories about the old hag struck her as nothing more than folklore, tales meant to scare children. The villagers spoke of the old hag with a mix of fear and reverence, describing her as a malevolent spirit that preyed on the unsuspecting. Sarah listened politely, but she couldn't hide her skepticism.
Sleep paralysis, she explained to a group of wide-eyed villagers. It's a common phenomenon. She had read about it in medical journals and knew that it was a well-documented condition. The sensation of being unable to move, the feeling of a presence in the room, and the hallucinations were all symptoms of sleep paralysis. Your mind wakes up before your body and you feel paralyzed. Hallucinations are common too. She described how the brain could create vivid and terrifying images, making it seem as though something supernatural was happening. But it was all in the mind, a trick played by a brain caught between sleep and wakefulness. The villagers exchanged uneasy glances. They had heard these explanations before, but they knew what they had seen and felt. The old hag was real to them, a part of their reality that couldn't be dismissed with scientific jargon. They knew better than to dismiss the legend of the old hag. The stories had been passed down through generations, and many had their own encounters to share. The eerie shadows, the feeling of being watched, and the unexplained noises were all too real for them. But Sarah, with her city skepticism and rational explanations, remained unconvinced. She believed that there was a logical explanation for everything, and that the villagers were simply misinterpreting natural phenomena. She was determined to prove them wrong. She would soon learn, however, that some things could not be explained away so easily. One night, as she lay in bed, she felt a heavy weight on her chest. She tried to move, but her body wouldn't respond. Panic set in as she saw a dark figure at the foot of her bed. The shadows of Hollow Creek held secrets that science could not explain. Sarah's experience left her shaken, and she began to question everything she had believed. The line between reality and the supernatural blurred, and she realized that some mysteries were beyond human understanding.
The first sign came as a subtle shift in the atmosphere. The air in my bedroom grew heavy, thick with an unseen presence. I tried to shake off the feeling, attributing it to the unfamiliar stillness of the countryside. But as I lay in bed, sleep evading me, a sense of dread began to creep in. Then it hit me. A crushing weight pressed down on my chest, stealing my breath. Panic welled up inside me. I tried to call out, but my voice caught in my throat, trapped in a silent scream. I tried to move, to throw off the suffocating weight, but my limbs felt like lead, heavy and unresponsive. My heart pounded against my ribs, each beat echoing in the silence of the room. I was trapped, helpless in my own body. And then, through the terror, I saw it. A figure materialized from the shadows in the corner of the room. It was hunched, its form indistinct in the darkness, but I could feel its malevolent gaze fixed upon me. Fear, cold and paralyzing, gripped my heart. This was no hallucination. This was real. The figure began to move towards me, gliding silently across the floor. As it drew closer, I could make out more details. Its skin was ashen grey, stretched tautly over bones that protruded at unnatural angles. Its eyes, burning like hot coals, seemed to bore into my very soul.
Low guttural growl.
The old hag leaned in close, her breath cold and fetid washing over my face. A low guttural growl emanated from deep within her throat, sending shivers down my spine. I was trapped, paralyzed by fear, at the mercy of the creature that had haunted my nightmares.